Welcome to another episode of Grief Talk. Everything you want to know about grief and more. I'm your host, Vaughn Solis. As an author, life transformation coach, online instructor, and bereaved mom since 2005, I'll be bringing you great content that is informative, inspiring, and practical. Whether you have suffered a loss or other adversity, stay tuned and tapped in as I cover a variety of topics to help you get where you want to go on your journey to heal and grow. Today's guest is Daniel Villalobos. Daniel is a self-healing coach, an intuitive breathwork guide and mentor whose mission is to help individuals heal generational trauma. He is certified as a pause breathwork facilitator and aims to guide others in reclaiming their divinity and living into their higher purpose in order to share their personal medicine with the world. We're going to learn what all of this means in this podcast episode interview, and I can't wait to get started. Okay, so welcome to the show, Daniel. Really happy to have you.
Yeah, thank you, Vaughn. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great. So I have been really excited to do this show with you for a few reasons. In the introduction, I introduced you to my audience as someone who is, and I have to just read this because my memory's not so good, but who works as a self-healing coach, an intuitive breathwork guide, and a mentor. And this is what I especially love, to help people claim their divinity and share their personal medicine with the world. And we're going to be getting into that in just a little bit, audience. But I just really loved, I've never heard a term personal medicine before. And so I just love that. And I want to learn about that in terms of what you're going to explain personal medicine is, and then how as individuals we can interpret that and apply it in our life. And I know you're doing that in part to help conscious growth and personal development and individuals to actually rise to be the best that they can be. So I'm really excited if you want to start out, Daniel, with just letting our audience, viewers, listeners know a little bit more about the work that you do and how you came to do it.
Thank you, Vaughn. Thank you. What I do is a combination of a few different things. Obviously, breath work is the main, I would say, medicine that I'm holding space for. I would say first and foremost, I feel that I'm a sacred space holder, and that's the juice of what I do, I feel like, because when you work with me, I create a safe and supportive container for anyone who enters, the space with me. And so within that, we're exploring what's possible. So it's just using a number of different modalities or excuse me, modes of expression and experience. That's what I personally identify with the most out of everything. Because whatever we do, whatever we're doing in the moment is always, either we're taking up space, we're giving space. So what I do is I hold space, and together we explore what's possible.
That sounds so interesting. I love the term sacred space holder. And so when you think, I'm just going to ask a little question here. So when you talk about sacred space, are you sort of referring as the energy that, like our energy field, our mental, our emotional headspace? Like, what are you sort of referring to when you talk about sacred space?
I suppose it's a combination of all of that, but yes, mainly the energy field of the virtual container that I'm conducting, but also, I guess, the space that we are joining in beyond that. I feel like technology has us here, right? You're in Canada, I'm in California, and we're able to meet in this little box because of a wired and wireless connection. But our energies are
they're unified.
they're unified.
You feel
right?
that you feel that unity, right? And it's not just a visual thing, because when I was working one-on-one with angel practicing as an angel therapy practitioner, and I did almost all of my readings by phone, and when I converted to phone, it was almost more sacred than actual physical face to face. There were less disruptions, and you could imagine just who you were talking. I didn't even know what the person looked like who I was talking to, right? So space is space, and I'm just asking you, and we're elaborating on it a little bit, just because I don't think a lot of people think of the energy around them. I think a lot of people don't even understand energy around them and themselves as energy, which does create a space, either embracing or rejecting. And I think it can be a barrier to a lot of things that we attract for ourselves and how we feel about ourselves. It's what we're doing to maintain that vibration and that sacred space around us. I'm just going to ask a little bit here. So when you work with individuals and be the container of this sacred space, do you help them sort of identify what kind of space they're holding? And yeah.
That was actually a very good description of how you went into it, about the energy, the connection of both of our energies and our vibrations. People talk about good vibes and bad vibes, and that's, and whether or not we label them in that way, right? If we just take that part out, even, we're sending out, we're radiating something, right? We all have an energy field. So like you said, some people are not even very aware of it, and it could be part of what you mentioned in the beginning as well. There's, or prior to this, but when we were talking about this discussion, is levels of programming, right? So there's just, and that's where I feel like the phrasing of reclaiming your divinity comes into play, because everyone can hold a sacred space. And the reason that I love to lead with breath work is because everyone's breath is sacred. We all have this gift. And even after somebody works with me for however long that is, even if it's one session, and however impactful that is, and whatever profound experience or whatever it is experience they have, they still walk away and their breath is still sacred. And I'm just talking to people about that. I'm explaining, I'm teaching, I'm exploring with them. That's why I said, like, what's possible, right? Can we look at how our energy field is, how it's affecting the world around us, right? So I love that you dove right in, because that's my thing. I get deep really fast.
Yeah. The what's so interesting is I'm a little bit afraid of breath work. And I'll be honest. And so for my audience, Daniel and I met in June virtually. Just prior to that, I had seen him in a networking platform, and just was really drawn to work with you, to not work with you, Daniel, but I mean, collaborate with you. And so we reached out and we decided to connect, and we connected in the June. And so remembering that call, Daniel, and then you said, can I do a little breath work with you? And I'm like, ooh. But you did take me into a beautiful, calm space. And I'll tell you why breath work is uncomfortable for me. So for anybody watching, listening to this, you can maybe relate. So I have post-traumatic stress disorder from the suicide of my daughter in July 2005, and it's never gone away. It wasn't diagnosed officially till 2014. So I lived with it for a really long time, and I had a really long time to have the trauma impact me in a whole bunch of different ways. And so breath work is about stillness. And I've been at this game since I was 25, a little bit before that, so a few decades, folks. And I would say in large part, the techniques, the essence of what breath work is for, which is to find that stillness, which is to get to the center of self. We can call it a number of different things, and we do call them a number of different things as different generations of teachers come into the public and teaching space. But ultimately, and you can absolutely comment on this in just a moment, Daniel. A lot of people, they go into breath work, and in trauma also. Breath work is very important. So if you find yourself rising in anxiety, which accompanies PTSD, and there's this nervousness, there's this survival mode, this always looking over your shoulder, what's going to happen next, and so on and so forth. The moment you stop to just do breath work and be still and get centered, it almost critically, that's what has to happen to even make a decision to not react in the same survival mode. So I've been teaching myself to do that. But then but I also learned, it was really interesting that people that have PTSD, and I've learned this through psychiatrists and psychologists that offer webinars, which I attend as much as I can for the layperson, it can be very hard when you've been traumatized to be still. We don't want our mind still because there's the quietness we're supposed to have, and that place in center, but that can be very scary for people because it can lead to a lot of really, really uncomfortable, if not terrorizing thoughts. So in understanding that, and the fact that you do have a focus on generational trauma, I do want to ask you to explain generational trauma, but I would also like to ask, in addition to that, do you have techniques, and we're not obviously going to have time to work with techniques, that's what people would come to you to work with, but suggestions or ways that people who are afraid to do breath work can learn to just take a risk and maybe go, okay, and try it, and try to benefit of the breath work.
Yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot in that.
Sorry.
just to go to maybe the most recent of what I would describe as generational trauma, I would say some people might even refer to it as ancestral trauma if you look at it that way. But essentially it's trauma passed through generations.
Could you just give one example? I love that. And the generational, even maybe cultural trauma, but could you give just a generic example of what something that would cause generational trauma that we wouldn't even think about in modern day as generational trauma?
Right. And I think you can even say that they're very much connected sometimes, a generational and a cultural trauma. So you could say something as recent as everything that happened in Auschwitz, right? So that affected generations of people since.
Yeah.
And whether or not you were there or that was your parents, your grandparents, you were working in those camps. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with that is when I'm talking about concentration camps.
Yeah, I'm sure most people are. Yeah.
In the era of Nazis, right? So it's a random one that I picked. It's not like it's something that I focus on, but just thinking about how that experience, right? Because when we talk about trauma, it's usually based on an experience. It's either something that's a lived experience, or it could be something that you witnessed or even heard about, right? And it had its effect on you. It kind of leaves this stickiness.
I would say that the Ukraine war is like that.
Right. Thank you.
Today, we obviously can't get into that, and this is not a political podcast, but when you look at, I personally have to be really, really careful that when I look or read the news or, mostly it's read the news that's negative and absorb and feel what the people are going through and imagine the bombs going off and the fires and the burning and this poor planet just having to endure. This might sound hokey to some people, but the ground burning, the grasses, the trees on fires, the structures on fires, the people running. I am convinced that what's going on just today is going to cause generations of trauma for certain communities of people. Would you agree?
Right. And it could be, those are all great examples too, because even just, you mentioned ground and trees burning. I mean, that's happening all over the world, not just where they're having wars. There's fires burning all the time. And just that through that experience, maybe a certain fear or a perspective, an outlook that is formed from that experience and affect how you raise your kids, right? Like I have an infant right now, and it's very much in my mind looking at what I experienced as a child, how that affected my youth into my adulthood, and now being at a more centered, aware, conscious place within myself, feeling safe enough to address some of that I never processed, right? So now I can create a new ripple instead of it being, this is what I lived through, so that's what I'm going to pass along, right?
Yeah.
It affected me deeply, and I won't say, I'm not getting specific, right? But just certain experiences that, I mean, I'll just say it simply, right? Like it was hurtful or made me feel unsafe as a child, to where it affects the level of trust I have for authority figures, or like you mentioned, cultural. So there's so many layers.
I know.
Family,
Yeah.
school, community,
Yeah.
jobs. Like there's all these different experiences.
I think, do you agree? I'm just going to jump in for a second because I don't want to lose the thought. But so folks watching, listening this, we go from understanding the world as can be a traumatic place to live in and raise children and be positive and stay centered, because you never know when you don't know if a nuke's going to go off. So this is when, going back to what I was saying about I had to be really careful about reading and absorbing news and stuff like that. Certainly at the beginning of I just want to finish with this, at the beginning of the Ukraine war. So I grew up with the Chicken Little mentality. And for anybody that doesn't know what Chicken Little is, Daniel, do you know what Chicken Little is, having a babe?
Just the sky,
The
is
sky
falling.
is falling. The sky is falling. I too grew up in a lot of dysfunction. And while I do not blame my parents, because going down a whole other path, which you and I aren't able to talk about today, but I do believe we choose our situations, including our parents, and I'll be doing a show on that. So I take full responsibility. When I decided in my early 20s to take full responsibility for the experiences, it got my mom and dad off the hook. And there were health issues and a whole bunch of different things, a lot of dysfunction. So starting with that for the people today thinking about this, and going back to what you just said, you can start a new ripple. But doing that, I'll ask you to just sort of verify with me and confirm. You have to be willing to look at where the trauma has stemmed from and heal it to create that new ripple, right?
I believe so, yeah. And so just to bring it back to the work that I'm doing, so the reason why I consider it a sacred space, and it has the capacity to help people feel safe, to feel supported enough and held enough to just be in their body and remember these things. And usually that's kind of one of the things that can happen when you do breath work, is you start to remember things that maybe you filed away a long time ago. And so it can be scary. And I would imagine that's why some people, maybe even like yourself, are a little frightened just thinking about that kind of practice, because, oh, hey, I'm going to go down that road again. I don't know if I can take it right now.
Yeah.
And so there's a level of presence that's needed, but it's also an act of courage, really, to really to want to do any of the work, any kind of personal development work, right? So
I agree. But I'm going to admit I'm terrified to revisit my trauma from my daughter's death, so I've never done it. And I don't know if I'll ever do it in this lifetime. but I'm curious. And I'm going to admit that. I'm just going to be honest with that because, so can you speak to, so people like me, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that doesn't want to revisit trauma. Certain kinds of trauma might be okay. I can go back to my childhood and go, hey, I survived. I did it. My brain understands that's over. You're a survivor. You did great. And you chose to change your life and make those ripples turn into huge, big waves. But for the people who are really afraid, what could they start with? What could we start with to just, and by the way, I also want to just say right up front, this is not medical advice, people. This is
Right.
just those of us that are in alternative healing. So this is in support of any medical assistance you do need for trauma or any other affliction that you're dealing
Yeah.
with. Mental, emotional. We are in alternative healing. We are just really meant to offer a support to traditional stuff.
Right.
But at any rate, from your practice and how you practice and how you work with individuals, um, what would you say to the person? Like, how do you make them feel safe enough just to even think about, like, is it starting with just one small memory, one small experience? Like, can you explain that?
I just want to, I will definitely answer, but I want to start with saying that wasn't even the focus that I had when I started doing breath work. It wasn't about healing trauma. It was something that I started to observe happening, and very much within myself first,
Okay.
of being able to be at a state of equilibrium and balance within my body and my breath, and feeling that kind of alignment, uh that that's what was happening. I was having, and this is another thing that can happen, is maybe you have spiritual downloads, whether that's auditory, visual, and I would get visuals of certain things that would bring me back to an experience. Would
Mm-hmm.
see myself as a child. And the thing that, and I wanted to just kind of start with that, just to say that this is still being developed, right? Like this is what I feel like is why I'm doing it, right? This is the why. But I also want to just invite everyone to not, that doesn't have to be why you try it, right? It just starts with awareness. So what I always lead with is even taking a moment to be aware of your breath. Notice your breath, not
Mm-hmm.
even feel the need to control it or change it or fix it.
Mm-hmm. It's so weird. I've listened. Breath work has literally, as you probably know, been around for a long, long time.
Right.
And they use it in cognitive therapy, they use it in other types of therapy. There's alternative healing that's been in breath work, meditations, the breath yoga, all of that stuff. And I have to tell you, so um, for the people like myself who just kind of go intellectually get it, there's got to be some. I'm not going to say like there's got to be something that can help us to really understand breath in a different way. I know it is so important, and without it, we wouldn't be here. But I think the point I'm trying to make is how can we even, and I don't know if you can answer this, but how can we even start to consciously honor our breath without necessarily, okay, sit down now, close your eyes and do nothing but think about your breath in and out and the counts 3, 4, 5 in, 4 out, whatever, which I love and is very relaxing and it does calm you down. But I'm talking about honoring the breath here. And I think you honor your breath. Literally, it to me, when you're talking, it sounds like you completely have mastered. Okay, and if you're not mastered, certainly an advanced student in just honoring, you're aware and honoring your breath. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah. And everything we do is done for a reason, right? Whether it's conscious or subconscious. And this is why it's such a shift, right? Maybe people are living from their subconscious, but they're not really aware of what's in their subconscious, right? So just bringing attention and intention to the way we breathe, right? So for me, there's an intention of paying reverence to the breath that I was gifted with, because not everybody has this gift right now. Not everybody is living this life right now. Everybody that's going to hear this or see this, yeah, you're here. Take a nice deep breath in with that. Just even one.
Yeah.
You're here. You can breathe. And that's what it is. That's why I said it starts with awareness and presence. Mastery takes a long time, so I won't even call myself that.
Right.
But everything we do, we take a breath. Even when we're sleeping, when we're not necessarily awake, we're breathing.
I'm going to think about that. I'm going to think about it because I feel different about myself. Again, for my audience, I was just thinking about that, Daniel, as you're talking, and I was going, okay, honor your breath, but not force myself. Just have a reverence for it. And you know what? It shifted my energy immediately. It totally did, because it's honoring the life force, but there's something different. Because listen, are they different? Is the life energy different from the life breath? I don't know.
Well, it is life force energy, in my opinion. Our breath is life force energy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't want to get down too far that rabbit hole, because energy for me is ongoing and is here long after our bodies go. But I'm going to really start practicing that for myself, because it really shifts the way I honor my body. And one of the things we have to do is honor the physical, our physical presence in this life. And correct me if I'm wrong. Well, I'm not wrong, but in my experience, I've met a lot of people who are in pain and don't honor themselves. Think of themselves last again. And if we even just go back to the trauma they've experienced, the dysfunction they've experienced, all those things that perhaps they didn't grow up with, that fully regulated the brain. In other words, feeling safe and secure, and having a certain autonomy to your presence, which gives you confidence and all sorts of other things. You know, when you grow up and you don't have that, and you have to sort of fumble along yourself and try and learn these things as an adult, you know, by the time you're in the mid-20s and the brain's okay, now it's developed. Well, okay, so you really have to try and start catching up at whatever age after the brain's fully developed to correct all that stuff. And this is what a lot of, you know, the work that people go into healing and light work and, you know, and whatever the younger generation calls it. In my generation, we called it light work, but it might be different now. I don't know. But at any rate, so there's a huge number of people, I think, that are living with the impact of stuff that isn't healthy for us. And so don't know how to honor themselves. And so one really easy fix in my very enlightened opinion that just happened now is to stop for a moment and give reverence to the breath. So thank you for that. I mean, you don't even know maybe that you affected me and maybe countless others by just sharing that, because you're an example. And that's one of the things I think that drew me to you, is your calmness. And I'm not going to say that, oh, Daniel, he's calm 24/7. You probably aren't. But that's not the point. The point for me is how we want to conduct ourselves at our most centered of beingness and take ourselves back there. So that is the point, the place that we choose to function from. And yes, we're going to be pulled in different directions and have distractions and things that make us act emotionally and the physical stuff. But for me, it's all about whether or not we have the skills to bring us back to center. And that center for you sounds like it's your breath. For me, it's angels and higher consciousness and stuff like that. But now I'm going to throw the breath in there, because there has to be a connection between the physical and the spiritual to make this a truly holistic experience and most powerful experience for us. Wouldn't you agree?
Definitely. And I would say that's part of the experience, and it has been for me. It has been for many people that I've worked with that um, they feel a presence, they feel energies, they feel angels. So I would say it's very much connected, right? Like it's I don't even know if I want to call it a gateway, but
I
kind of
do.
like that. It's kind
I
of
do.
like that. Yeah. And it's our birthright. It's and you said it exactly where, you know, people are moving and moving and thinking and I mean, how much time are you spending in your body? Right? And so our breath is the beginning. It brings
Hmm.
us back to our body, which holds all the stories, all the experiences. It's been with us since day one.
Yeah. Oh.
It has all that, but it also holds a lot of wisdom. It also holds what was passed down to us.
The good and the bad, right? The good and the bad. So we can tap into the good that hopefully everybody on this planet has experienced something that was pure and good, even if it was
Right.
just in the first moments of life. So using the breath to tap into that kind of space and have it eventually, I'm just sort of using my own words here, but have it eventually become the center from which people uh, choose to be present, function, all these things. Um, right. But, I'll just, you know what, I'm going to say adding it, for me, it's adding it as a component to what I already do to center myself, adding that
Yeah.
physical breath part as energy, but also the physical means to kind of ground me into the, no, you're still in the body. A lot of people in spiritual practice get very frustrated with being in a physical body. And yeah. And yeah. And anyway, so it's one of the things for people. And even when people who are on the very early path in a spiritual practice or wanting to know more, they're yearning for more knowledge. They're yearning, they know there's got to be more. There's got to be more. That's a very early journey. And I will say to anybody that hasn't reached that awakening, you the first time you have your awakening, your life changes and you can't go back. You can't go back. You are awakened. And while we all improve our, like live to improve what we know, how much better we can be, etc., and expand our consciousness, that first awakening, when it happens for you, because you choose it to happen for you, in whatever way it happens, you can't go back. And so, those of us on a path to always be expanding ourselves, there is this, or there can be this struggle to integrate it with having these physical experiences that in some cases we think, well, I shouldn't be creating this for my life. Why am I struggling? Why am I ill? Why am I this? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? And then you'll have people go, oh, it's all part of the, what's the saying? You're a spiritual being having a physical experience. And while that's very true, there's not a lot out there that necessarily teaches us to balance the physical with the spiritual. For me, it was years of like living in the spiritual and kind of just disregarding the physical. And this is why I love talking to you so much, because you're the first person in a long time, and possibly it's just because I wasn't ready to sort of embrace this before in the same way, that is showing, well, wait a minute now, we can start. This is what I'm picking up from the conversation. We can start to honor the body and the physical, which I do believe we have to do. But I mean, now experience that. One thing to talk about it, it's another thing to practice it and experience it by starting with the breath. And that's what I love about. That's probably why I met you, but that's what I love about what you're doing, because it's so simple, yet it could be very complex, very complicated. So for people, who, as we talked earlier, are afraid of breath work, are afraid of being still, and even afraid of their own power. But
Mm.
yeah, it takes a lot of courage to be in touch with your own power. And I'm also going to wager there's a lot of people that don't understand what personal power is, and I do a lot of work in that.
Mm. I would
But
love to have that conversation with you at a different time.
yes, but I mean, it's wonderful to embrace it. But yeah, so it's kind of starts with the breath. And when I think about it in terms of not honoring my breath, not even really thinking about it, I'm almost feeling like I'm doing and have done a huge disservice to this body that has done so much in this life and provided it's given life. Life's been taken, from me that I gave that I birthed. That's been really, really tough. Can also be another reason why I don't really like breath work, because it keeps us living. And a lot of people who are maybe in pain, suffering, maybe they don't want to really be breathing. So there is that component, but that's not really what we're talking about today,
Well,
unless you want to.
I would just like to say this since I sort of stumbled past it earlier when you invited me to say what I do and how I got to it. So originally, I think without knowing it as breath work, it was one of the ways that I was able to feel like I healed or I rehabilitated from an injury that I had. And this was 10 plus years ago, but it took for me to be present and actually notice how my breathing is affecting everything else, including the pain levels, because I found myself, like a lot of people do when they're having stress and anxiety, which is also something that I've lived with, but having physical pain, you end up holding your breath as if that's going to do something and block the pain, momentarily. And I love that you talked about the mind body connection and just actually, hey, I'm alive. And so that's part of it, is we're celebrating the aliveness that we do have right now. And even without it becoming a whole much deeper thing as far as healing trauma or anything like that, I would invite anyone to just, if you have any kind of calling to this, and I know this is not the end, but to just think about it as a way to honor your human experience and access more presence, and just see how that changes, how that shifts for you, and just see what's possible from there. But for me, it started with actually having a somewhat serious injury, which breathing was just one of the things that I did, but medications weren't working, physical therapy somewhat, but it was a combination of actually alternative methods, including breathing, which is something we do, right? But it's breathing on purpose. So just that first step of saying, I'm going to be in my body, honor my breath, honor my body. And I think that's part of the experience for a lot of people, whether it is a physical injury or it's something very traumatic, that they lost a certain part of their power, as you say it, right? And they no longer feel safe in their bodies. So they don't want to go there. They would rather be occupied on the phone, or just, I have all these things to do. And I mean, we always do, but that doesn't mean that there's not time for us to just be.
Yeah, we are meant to have this conversation, um, because I speak for well, thank you for sharing about how you got into it with your accident, and I love what you said about breathing on purpose. Wow, there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm going to be thinking about that a lot, because again, we don't have time. I'll for the audience, I'll expand on Daniel's wonderful coined expression, breathing on purpose. But I'll talk a little bit more in another episode on solo, probably about what from my experience, my background in metaphysics and spirituality, this conflict we have when we're in deep pain and suffering and struggling with wanting to be on the planet, or we might not feel we deserve to be on the planet. There's a number of reasons why we might not really want to be consciously breathing. And like that is kind of packing a punch for me. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of packing a punch for me because the breath is so related. I actually didn't know our conversation was going to turn into this, And so I'm thinking while I'm speaking with you, because it's way more than breath. It's I believe that if we want to be on the planet, we're on the planet, and if we don't want to be on the planet, we will create an exit for ourselves. I mean, I truly believe that, and I'm not saying at all, not necessarily. I am not saying we will harm ourselves. I am saying that my decades of spiritual practice and the teachers I worked with and so on, I feel what fits for me in understanding our choices about life and not living physically is that we can create exits for ourselves and something will happen. And I actually had, not long after my daughter died, which is 17 years ago, I had an experience where I was really struggling with wanting to be on the planet, And one night, it was around, I don't know, midnight, I don't know, 1, I don't know. And I was sort of in a lucid state. I really was awake, though. And what I believe was an angelic visit, because it wasn't scary. I've had visits in the way years ago that were scary. And when the angels have visited me, and they've done that about maybe 5-6 times, it's not scary. It's like you're in awe. So the presence was there and basically said to me, "You have a choice to be here, yes or no." Just like that. And it was so powerful. I was like, oh my God, all I have to do is say yes or no. And you know what? I said yes, but I don't know what would have happened if I said no. Would I have maybe gone in my sleep? I don't know. There's just recent stories not long ago of a few of them actually, really young people, like young teens, 16, 17 and younger. And their kids, I think there was a 12-year-old, they just didn't wake up in the morning. They went to bed and they didn't wake up in the morning. And the reason we heard about these stories, they were in the news, is because they were children of prominent people. One in the sports world and somebody else in another, was quite a public figure. And that stopped me. And I thought, well, why would a child or a young teen or whatever just not wake up in the morning? And they can't find a cause, okay? They can't find a cause. And so going back to that experience that I had, because I was really struggling from that moment on, that I said, yes, I need to be here. I'm not sure I want to be here, but I think, yes, I want to be here because I know I need to be here. I never had that visit again. It was one of the most astounding moments I experienced. And I experienced loads and loads and loads of moments and visits with angels and visits with my daughter and so on for years after she passed. So I obviously have, when you talk about a gateway, I believe in a gateway. I often talk about the heart as a gateway to open up to that spiritual connection. So if you're stuck in your physical body right now and you feel, I can't feel or see anything beyond this, lug of a heavy weight that I'm in. And I just mean it's a heavy corporeal existence, all of our muscle, bones, blood, all of that guck. It's not. And when you can feel yourselves as energy, it's super light and super pure. And that's why it's the world that's preferable to live in. And that's why, getting back to the honoring the breath, see, so we're going to give people, myself included, food for thought in terms of how they want to view their experience on the planet in their circumstances. And do you even want to be breathing? Really? Do you even really want to be breathing? I might be going down a little bit, like not a rabbit hole, but just taking it in a direction. It's just food for thought. And so the people that come to you and work with you, Daniel, playing on that little theme for a moment, do you think they're struggling with that at all? Like, do you think with everything I've just said that it is like people struggle with breath work just because they're not really sure or they're not even enjoying their life. So what's the point of breathing? I have to breathe. I'm wired to breathe. My brain is making me breathe, but I'm not sure I want to be, let's call it consciously breathing or purposefully breathing. Do you want to speak about that at all?
Well, from what I said about gateways, and I started thinking of portals and what I do as a window or a door into a different possibility. I started thinking there's different entry points for different people of, you know, getting to the next checkpoint of their life, whatever that is. And I feel like I haven't quite got anyone. I have had some folks who were maybe having some of those thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a number of different people for different reasons that were just grieving in general. So I wouldn't say there's a big population that is coming to me right now
Yeah.
for that, but it
Yeah.
is something I've witnessed, and I will say that I resonate with that as well. Just even thinking back
Yeah.
to what I was talking to you about, not feeling comfortable in my own body because of physical pain. And of course, there's plenty of reasons that we could go deep on, but um, there's there's what you mentioned about being in the body. There's being connected to the spiritual world, and and
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the conversation about different energies. And what I love about breath work also is that there's also just kind of playing in the space, in the spaciousness.
Hmm.
So there's not necessarily, hey, I'm telling you to do this because I want you to feel your pain, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that can be something that happens, that people feel maybe in a better place to be present in their bodies and acknowledge their feelings. Because even I'll say this, as a man, I know for a lot of men, they don't want to acknowledge or feel their feelings, right? So that's a whole other conversation. So just kind of speaking to that in regards to your breath being able to allow you to feel that spaciousness where, okay, I'm I'm stepping, I don't, I'm trying to word this carefully, but um feeling that you are outside of your body, but you're still connected, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you talk about grounded. Another reason people do it is to be grounded, to feel more connected with the earth, with
Mm-hmm.
this existence. But I guess what I'm saying is, there, even just the feeling of spaciousness, I'll put it like that.
So I want to understand this. So when you're talking about the feeling of spaciousness, are you talking about it in terms of like allowing yourself to feel free and almost liberated in, I could call it an energy feel. I could call it in the boundaries we do, or well, everybody has boundaries, but using, I don't know another word for it, but that space around us that we claim it and own it and we can do what we want with it. Are you sort of saying that?
Yeah, it's just a different awareness, right? So there's, yeah, you could say that.
Okay. So, like playing in the space. So, we can do what we want, but by being aware of it, by being aware of it through the breath, we can sort of manage it. Again, I'm coming up with stuff because I'm trying to understand it. We can manage it. We can quote play in it. We can help me here. I'm trying to define it in a way like we can see it, view it, experience, feel it, and not be trapped by it. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yes. So again, just coming back to it being a different level of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're experiencing at the time, instead
Mm-hmm.
of feeling trapped, like you say, I'm trapped in this pain, I'm trapped in this experience, I'm trapped in this moment where my life was in danger, or as you're saying, even just questioning my life and being able to just let that be there without an attachment.
And I'll throw in even anxiety or stress,
Right.
which
Anything.
which people feel. So managing, so are you saying that we can change what we feel with the space around us by being aware of and managing the breath? Is that what you're saying?
Right. Because it can help you change your state of being, right? You talked
Yeah.
about regulation earlier, so
Yeah.
help with self-awareness, self-regulation,
Yeah.
of your nervous system, if we want to be even more specific, right? So shifting from a fight or flight mode or any of those other ones into a rest and digest.
Rest and digest. I love that.
People that have stress and anxiety, we're looking at the past or the future, right? You mentioned it earlier. It hurts sometimes to feel you're here. I don't want to be present. So stress and anxiety, you're, oh, this is so much.
Mm-hmm.
How does one breathe when they're deep in that kind of stress or anxiousness or nervousness?
Yeah. So I wanted to mention two things. Okay, so one, when you were talking about I don't want to be here. So I don't want to leave the audience, viewers, listeners thinking that, nobody wants to be on the planet. There's plenty of people out there who are living wonderful lives, and listen, this isn't going to be a conversation for them. But for people who and that could be a lot of different reasons. For people that when you're thrown into a traumatic situation, it could be loss, it could be accident, it could be any number of things, but some major trauma or even um, um, adversity, just something that knocks you off balance, or you're not living the life you are, can't resonate with. So I'm speaking to the millions and millions of people who are doing the commute and going to the job that's paying the bills that they, foresee for the next 30 years or whatever. And for whatever reason, uh, aren't living a purpose driven life, don't know how to live a purpose driven life, don't even think about it. It's, they're in that status quo, could be a rut. And I think a lot of us have been there, and sometimes, there are responsibilities and they take our attention more than being able to be in a situation where you can live the life you really authentically want to be living. Sometimes time is very important, and then patience plays a huge part in, right now, these are priorities, and this is what I'm committing my life to. But so a lot of that, and hey, I've been there. All right. I think a lot of people have been there, and we're doing jobs that this isn't really aligned. And the more you choose to be purposeful in your life, and if that is aligned spiritually and with an expanded consciousness, and we usually become more purposeful when we think bigger than ourselves and are open to opportunities and possibilities and our potential and our personal power and all of that stuff. When we feel out of alignment with that, for whatever reason, it could even be looking after parents. We just think that now I'm in my 50s, I'm getting close to retirement. And then there are a lot of people I've met that get stuck in a different kind of status quo, and they've got now responsibilities having to deal with aging parents. And fortunately, I did not have to do that. And unfortunately, my mother died very suddenly by a heart issue at 78. And so that never became a reality for me. And we would have done what we needed to if we had to. So when we experience a lot of anxiety and stress related to everything I just talked about living a life we're not authentically aligned with, and we're waiting for this or that to be over, the breath work I can see is very important. And I'll speak to also like anxiety triggers. I actually have them. So can you give one quick practice tip we could do to immediately get ourselves aligned, back in center, even if that center is just calm, I'm calm. Do you have at least just one small practice tip that you could give us?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I feel this is also a beautiful segue if you still would like to come back to the personal medicine uh,
Yes.
topic of discussion. But
Yes.
um, one that I really love, and it's just simply a two-part breath,
Okay.
breathing on purpose.
Yeah.
So breathing in through the nose to a count of 4,
Mm-hmm.
and breathing out from the mouth to a count of 6.
Okay. That's nice. That's nice. Shall we do it? You want to just do it real quickly and count it out, count it out. And anybody that wants to just take a pause in the episode, I'll let you, with your wonderful soothing voice, just count us in and count us out.
Definitely. And I would also invite you, if you feel comfortable, to either close your eyes or just soften your gaze.
Okay. I'm going to close my eyes.
Yeah. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you can start with just noticing your breath, how you're breathing now, without any need to change it or control it or fix it. Feel your feet flat on the ground, sitting tall, relaxing your shoulders, relaxing your forehead, the muscles in your face, your jaw, and slowly breathing in to a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhaling. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Pausing for just a moment. Breathing in again through the nose. 2, 3, 4. Releasing again. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One more in. 2, 3, 4. Releasing softly. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And just coming back to your natural breath. Just noticing any shift. Noticing the feeling, the sensations, the energy in your body. And where you feel them. Taking one more deep breath in through the nose. Slowly taking in as much air as you can. Comfortably, and then releasing from the mouth with a sigh. Softly inviting in some movement in your hands and feet, any wiggles or stretching. Softly blinking your eyes back open when you're ready.
Very nice. So for my audience, I did go through that with Daniel, and what it does for me, without getting too personal, is I understand immediately when I take the time to do that how rigid I am and how much I keep myself in a very stressed posture. And I don't want to. And everything I teach is about, and by the way, I wanted to say we teach what we learn. So, very often, what else are you going to teach, right? And so I'm just sharing with people who might come out of that. It was beautiful, and thank you for that. Come out of that and go, oh, but I still don't breathe. I'm not breathing right, or I'll never get it. Keep practicing, and keep practicing, because it really changes the whole everything. Thank you. Let's just close with personal medicine, and tell me if you came up with that or if it's come from somewhere else, but what it means to you, and how individuals can think about themselves as offering personal medicine to the world.
I want to say, I would say it's not mine. It's something that I heard speaking to other people that consider themselves healers. And there being different types of medicine that we can offer, even an individual that you might have different types of medicine that you can offer, that can be healing, that can be relaxing, calming, nourishing. Coming back to what you were saying earlier about having a purpose-driven life, getting to that place, starting with your awakening. So I feel like everyone, and I'll just use the word calling. Everyone has a calling, something that they were put into this world to do. And like you said, a lot of us at one time or another, or maybe for your whole life, get caught up in I'm going to go to this job because it pays the bills. And even though I don't like what I'm doing, or I'm miserable, or maybe I like it a little bit, it is not actually what I love to do. And some of us, or I won't even go there, but let's say just the personal medicine, right? Like for you, I think that you found it. It's talking about grief. It's talking about different ways to be in touch with more than just yourself.
I get it. It's related to your purpose. It's finding that
Yeah.
that medicine that you can give to the world. I get it.
Right. And I guess that's why I like that term, as it being, it's your purpose, but it's a medicine, because it can be nourishing for other people. It can be healing for other people. And I would say, if not most of the time, probably all the time,
Yeah. Yeah.
we take it ourselves.
Yeah. Our own personal medicine, because so we don't have to be on a world stage. We don't have to be taking on a leadership role. We don't have to be, serving others in a greater ability than, or greater, in a greater context than just serving our immediate loved ones, ourselves. But it's remembering to serve ourselves, to dose ourselves up with, I'm just thinking about it in terms like that, and give us the medicine we deserve. It could be love, purpose, all of these wonderful, beautiful, positive energy things that we all come to arrive at in different ways. Thank you for sharing that. I love that. I love that. We're probably going to have to close this one out. I feel like we unpacked. Oh my goodness. I I almost feel like it was an out of body experience for me. I mean, I'm not crazy, folks. It just, I learned a lot, and it's fun when you're learning, but that connection, and you've given me a lot of food for thought, and a practice, something to start with. And I really thank you for that, Daniel. And I hope anybody watching or listening this feels the same, and gets out of it what they need to take out of it by watching or listening this episode. I did just want to let you know that I'll be putting your links, contact links below the description, in the description, and so your preferred way for people to contact you. And for anybody. You do you can work with people online. You're based in California, but you do a lot of work with online clients, and like you
At this point in time, I'm doing all virtual. So
All
I work
virtual.
with people all over the world.
excellent.
Yeah.
The world is your oyster. I'm sending everybody around the world to Daniel for sacred space and breath work because he's truly gifted. You are truly gifted, Daniel. I know that because I've been exposed to an awful lot of people who work in breath work and stuff like that. But you really, I think what I'm feeling from you is compassion and empathy. And it's not just by rote. It's like you really care and you've experienced it and you've lived it and you're working on yourself. And for all of us who are in this teaching and healing space, we're teaching and healing ourselves. You know, we're learning and healing ourselves as we go. So no one's ever claiming to be perfect and have got all the answers. We're just in this together, and our stories matter, and what we do matters. And sharing that is how we heal and grow. Anyway, it has been my absolute honor and pleasure to spend this time with you, Daniel. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. And we'll be talking again.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Vaughn. I
Yeah.
appreciate you. Hello
Okay.
to everyone out there.
Okay, love to everyone. Bye.